cracked expanse of Westfield Mall's parking lot unfurled before me like a desolate graveyard beneath a sky hemorrhaging its last light, the neon signs overhead stuttering with the irregular pulse of a heart on the brink of failure. It was October 15th, 2024, 10:45 p.m., the air thick and oppressive, saturated with the acrid bite of burnt wires and the cloying rot of decay that clung to my tongue like a bitter residue. I guided my rusted Honda into a shadowed space near the main entrance, the vehicle's engine gasping its final, tubercular breath before falling silent, the hood trembling as if mourning its own demise. The glass doors ahead loomed like the maw of some ancient, forgotten beast, their surfaces reflecting only an inky void, unmarred by the flicker of life within. A frigid October wind sliced through the shattered asphalt, its mournful howl threading through the fissures like a funeral dirge, carrying with it the faint, unsettling scent of something long buried, earth turned sour, flesh turned to dust. At 36 years old, I was Cal Harrow, a man carved hollow by the jagged edges of my own betrayal. 3 years prior, I had sold out my crew for a heist payout, a choice that incinerated every bridge I'd ever crossed and left trust a smoldering ash heap in my wake. Cash had become my sole allegiance, a merciless taskmaster that drove me to the fringes of society, to night guard gigs at dead malls where background checks were a distant memory. Dorn, the mall's manager, had shown no interest in my shadowed past when I responded to his Craigslist ad. Only the promise of cash under the table, 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., $70 a night. Easy money, he'd rasped, for babysitting a corpse. The words had echoed in my mind as I'd accepted, a lifeline cast into the abyss of my desperation. I ground my cigarette beneath my boot, the ember sizzling against the damp concrete, a fleeting spark swallowed by the darkness, and approached the entrance. The automatic doors wheezed open with a groan that reverberated deep in my chest, a sound akin to the last exhalation of a dying creature, releasing a wave of stale air thick with the greasy residue of a food court abandoned years ago, overlaid with the sharp, ozone tang of electrical failure. The concourse yawned before me, a cavernous silence broken only by the faint drip of water from a skylight fractured by time, its tiles shattered like the bones of some prehistoric beast, shadows pooling like tar beneath the flickering fluorescence. Each breath I drew tasted of metal and decay, a sour metallic edge reminiscent of old pennies left to rust, mingled with the stale grease of a kitchen that had not served a meal in decades. This place was a mausoleum, its walls whispering secrets I wasn't yet ready to hear, and I, Cal Harrow, was its unwilling guardian. From the gloom near a shuttered GameStop, Dorn materialized, his face slick with sweat despite the chill, a sheen that caught the stuttering light like oil on water. At 50-something, his frame was soft, his middle rounded by years of neglect, and his eyes, darting evasive, refused to meet mine, as if afraid of what they might find. His handshake was a clammy ordeal, like grasping wet clay left to bake in the sun, his fingers trembling with an unease he masked poorly. "You're late," he said, his voice taut with something that hovered between irritation and dread, though I knew I wasn't. Had sat in my car for 20 minutes, wrestling with the gnawing suspicion that this job might be a trap I couldn't escape. I kept my silence, letting the lie slide. "Right, listen," he pressed on, his gaze flicking toward the mall's heart, where a cracked skylight spilled a frail thread of starlight onto dry fountains, their basins crusted with mineral stains that resembled tears dried by neglect. Last guy skipped town, no notice, left his stuff in the office. Simple job. Check cameras every 15 minutes, patrol every hour, ignore any speaker static. System's been fritzing since the 80s. He led me through the concourse, a spectral guide through a landscape of desolation. The security gates, rusted and jagged like the teeth of some iron beast, guarded the husks of once thriving stores. Victoria's Secret, its mannequins draped in cobwebs. Spencer's, its neon signs dark. And old Walden Books, its dust-caked windows a tomb for forgotten narratives. The food court sprawled ahead, a necropolis of sticky tables and silent counters, the grease stains on the floor like ghostly footprints of a life long extinguished. Dorn unlocked a door marked Security near the abandoned Radio Shack, revealing an office that assaulted my senses. A cramped space dominated by 4 grainy monitors. A desk bearing a half-eaten sandwich green with mold. A logbook yellowed with age, and a radio crackling with static. The odor was a visceral blow, decay and desperation. A miasma that clung to the walls and seeped into my clothes. He dropped the keys, radio, and logbook onto the desk as if they scorched his palms. Log your patrols, note anything weird. But honestly, nothing happens here. It's dead. The way he emphasized dead sent a shiver through me. A word weighted with denial, as if he were trying to convince himself as much as me. Questions? He asked, already retreating, sweat beading on his brow like dew on a corpse. Pays cash, end of shift. With that, he fled, his footsteps echoing until the doors wheezed shut, leaving a silence so dense it pressed against my skull like a physical force. I sank into the creaky office chair, the monitors flickering with feeds of empty halls, the timestamp reading 11:23 p.m. A long night stretched before me, my coffee already cold, its bitterness a mirror to my dwindling hopes. I reached for my phone to distract myself, but a soft, deliberate scratching at the door halted me. Nails on wood, patient, insistent, a sound that raised the hairs on my neck. "Hello," I called, my voice fracturing the stillness. The door creaked open without a touch, and an old man slipped inside, wiry and 60-something. His presence a specter carved from nightmare. His janitor's jumpsuit hung loose, the name tag reading Walt in faded letters, and his grin, jagged, predatory, seemed to split his face unnaturally wide. His eyes gleamed under the fluorescence, pupils dilated to an unnatural degree, reflecting the light like shards of broken glass. "You the new guy?" he rasped, his voice a grating whisper, like sandpaper dragged across steel. I nodded, my throat dry. "Cal Harrow. Didn't know anyone else worked nights." His grin widened, revealing yellow teeth stained with the detritus of decades. Coffee, tobacco, and something darker. "Oh, I don't work here. Not anymore. But I left you something." He reached into his pocket with fingers like brittle twigs, withdrawing a creased sheet of paper that he placed on the desk with a reverence that unsettled me. "Rules. They hear you first, Cal. Remember that." He backed away, his movements jerky, as if fleeing some unseen pursuer, and vanished into the shadows, leaving behind a scent of mothballs and a sour, unplaceable odor that lingered like a warning. A hollow laugh escaped me, reverberating off the office walls like a death knell, but the sound felt foreign, detached. A prank, I told myself, a cruel jest left by the last guard to unnerve his successor. Yet the weight of the paper in my hand, the tremor in my gut, suggested otherwise. I folded it carefully, tucking it into my jacket pocket as midnight tolled, a signal to begin my first patrol. The flashlight's beam cut through the darkness, a frail lifeline in a sea of shadows, as I stepped back into the concourse, unaware that I was crossing a threshold into a nightmare that would redefine my existence. The mall seemed to shift as I ventured into the concourse, the air growing colder, more oppressive, as if the very walls exhaled a breath of ancient malice. My footsteps echoed with a sharpness that startled me, each step a gunshot in the oppressive silence, the sound bouncing off the shattered tiles and peeling paint. The fluorescents overhead buzzed with a relentless drone, their sickly light casting long, distorted shadows that writhed in the corners, moving with a life of their own when I averted my gaze. The air carried a sour tang, reminiscent of milk left to curdle in the summer heat, overlaid with the electric bite of ozone, a scent that heralded a storm yet to break. I moved toward the food court, my path tracing Dorn's prescribed route past the rusted gate of Spencer's, its interior a cavern of dust and forgotten trinkets, and a jewelry store whose barred windows gleamed like the bars of a prison cell. The silence pressed against my eardrums, a cottony weight that amplified the sound of my breathing, too loud, too ragged, and the thudding of my heart, a drumbeat of unease. Then I heard it, a hum, faint at first, like static laced with the hint of teeth, emanating from somewhere ahead. I paused, straining to listen, the sound pulsing once, twice, before fading into the ether, leaving behind a lingering sensation of being observed, a gaze that prickled the back of my neck. "Hello," I called, my voice a fragile shard piercing the stillness, but the echo returned empty, unanswered. I pressed onward, the hum returning with greater force, a vibration that traveled through the floor tiles, up through the soles of my boots, a sound that set my bones to itching. A speaker crackled to life above my head, the noise sharp and invasive. "Cal?" I froze, the blood in my veins turning to ice. The voice was Marcus's, my former partner, the man whose trust I'd shattered, now incarcerated for 15 to 20 years in Greater Ford because of my testimony. "Cal, you there? We need to talk, brother." The word brother struck me like a physical blow, a reminder of the bond I'd betrayed. Rule 3 flared in my mind. If speakers crackle your name, leave the area fast. My hands trembled as I took a step back, the speaker crackling again with renewed insistence. "Cal, don't run on me. We got business to finish." "You know we do." The voice carried a weight of accusation, a phantom of guilt made manifest, and I bolted, my footsteps a frantic rhythm against the tiles. Marcus's voice pursued me, leaping from speaker to speaker as I fled toward the security office. A chorus of condemnation that faded only as I slammed the door behind me, my chest heaving, my breath a ragged gasp. The coffee mug on the desk rattled like castanets, a counterpoint to the frantic thud of my heart. The monitors flickered, and on the food court feed, a hum erupted, a shapeless distortion that warped the air, pulsing with a rhythm that seemed alive, vanishing as suddenly as it had appeared. My pulse hammered against my ribs. The clock read 12:47 a.m., a stark reminder that 5 hours and 13 minutes remained until dawn. Whatever dwelled within these walls had marked me, its presence a shadow that lengthened with each passing moment, and the night had only just begun to unveil its horrors. At 1:03 a.m., I sat in the office, hands still trembling, and pulled Walt's crumpled rules from my pocket, the paper crackling under my fingers like dry leaves. The next patrol loomed, a duty I could not shirk despite the dread coiling in my gut. I stepped back into the concourse, the air now thick with the scent of ash and the static charge of electricity, a prelude to something unseen. The shadows danced with greater vigor, their movements a silent choreography that ceased when met with my direct gaze. A scraping hum vibrated through the floor, and from a speaker in the shuttered radio shack, my own voice emerged, distorted, hollow, reciting, "Cash was my only loyalty." The words, thoughts I'd harbored in the privacy of my mind, spilled forth as if plucked from my skull. Rule 4 blazed in my memory. If a hum mimics your voice, don't speak. I clamped my lips shut, my heart a caged animal against my ribs, and retreated as the speaker crackled, continuing to unravel the threads of my shame with uncanny precision. An inexplicable pull drew me toward the maintenance hall near the old Sears anchor store, a dark corridor branching off like a vein into the mall's rotting heart. A crooked sign hung above, its letters faded to ghosts, authorized personnel only. From its depths, voices drifted, familiar, haunting. "Cal, brother, where you at?" Marcus's voice, raw with desperation. Not the distorted echo from the speakers, but a sound so real it tugged at the guilt buried deep within me. Another joined, softer, loving, "Sweetheart." My mother's voice, dead 10 years from a cancer that had wasted her away while I chased easy money. "Cal, honey, come here. Mama's waiting." My feet moved of their own accord, drawn by the siren call of forgiveness and reunion, until I caught myself at 2:17 a.m. Rule 5. Never enter the maintenance hall after 2 a.m. The voices grew insistent, overlapping, Marcus pleading for reconciliation, my mother's tone laced with longing, but I forced myself to halt, Walt's warning echoing. "They hear you first." The vent above began to hum, a low thrum that swelled into a generator's roar, filling the corridor with a sound that blurred my vision. Rule 6. If vents hum louder than usual, cover your ears. I pressed my hands against my head, but the vibration penetrated, seeping into my bones, my teeth. From the maintenance hall's entrance, a shapeless distortion emerged, a heat shimmer given form, pulsing and writhing. It coalesced into my mother's silhouette, her voice a crackling whisper. "Cal, baby, I've missed you so much." The figure stretched toward me, its hunger palpable, but an invisible barrier held it at bay, a boundary it could not cross. As I stumbled back, the form wavered, shifting into something formless, ravenous, before collapsing into static and vanishing. Back in the office, the monitors flickered, revealing hums moving through the halls, warping reality like light through water. Walt appeared on the maintenance hall feed, his jagged grin a blur of static, his features shifting like a corrupted signal, before fading into nothingness. At 2:43 a.m., the office vent hummed anew. My father's voice, rough from 40 years of cigarettes, listing every failure, every moment of cowardice that had led me here. Rule 8. Never hum back after 3 a.m. I fought the urge to respond, the walls vibrating as the hum became a tuning fork, resonating through every cell, my vision blurring with the weight of my guilt. At 3 a.m., the hums intensified, distortions flooding the camera feeds. Marcus with hands bound, my mother frail in her hospital gown, my crew's accusing eyes. Rule 9. If cameras show a hum moving, don't watch too long. I averted my gaze, but the entities pressed against the office, knocking at 4 a.m. with Dorn's voice, a mimicry I recognized as false. The assault persisted until 4:30 a.m., a cacophony of knocks and whispers, then fell silent, a pregnant pause thick with menace. At 5:03 a.m., the walls hummed again, a massive form pressing against the door, its tendrils of warped reality seeping through the cracks. I clung to the flashlight, a talisman against the unseen, surviving until 6 a.m. when Dorn's true knock released me. I quit, fleeing the mall's insatiable hunger, only to find its echoes, hums, shadows, voices, haunting my new apartment weeks later. The rules remain in my wallet, a fragile ward against the darkness that refuses to release me. Can you face the darkness that lingers in abandoned places? Or does the thought of being hunted by your own guilt send shivers down your spine? Reflect on whether this tale suits your taste for the macabre.